Good morning. It's great to be here this morning and see so many friends from across North Carolina, and particularly Western North Carolina. This morning I have been asked to introduce Scott Hamilton, who is the Executive Director of ARC, and Farrell Guillory, who's going to interview Scott, and they're going to have a conversation about regionalism and about ways that ARC has used some federal resources to help communities do a lot of innovative things around economic development, and regionalism is a huge piece of successful projects. But I first wanted to bring you greetings on behalf of Jim McCluskey. Jim represents Governor Cooper at ARC. He runs the governor's Washington, D.C. office and sits at the commission table with 12 of his colleagues from the 12 other ARC states. And unfortunately, Jim cannot get here this morning from Washington. Scott made the trip, but Jim could not. So I bring you greetings from him. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Scott in a second, but first I wanted to introduce Farrell. Farrell is a professor of journalism at UNC Chapel Hill, and for those of you that know me, you know that pains me to say UNC Chapel Hill, but Farrell, welcome. I bleed a little different color east. We won't talk about that. Farrell, in 2014, co-founded Education North Carolina, which is a nonprofit organization devoted to providing North Carolina with news, research, data, and policy analysis of trends, issues in pre-K to 12 education and community college. Farrell is also a senior fellow at MDC, a North Carolina-based nonprofit. He has also co-authored 9 State of the South reports, and I believe there's a pretty active website for that folks can go and look on and get information about North Carolina. He's also co-authored the book, The Carolinas, Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow, an exploration of social and economic trends. Before Farrell became a college professor, he was a journalist, and I think still wears that hat a lot. And he has been published in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and The Economist, to just name a few places where you may have read his works. Now I'm going to introduce my dear friend Scott Hamilton. Scott became the executive director of ARC in 2014, and prior to that, Scott managed and ran Advantage West for a number of years. He is a native North Carolinian. This is home for him. So it was very exciting when the commission chose to make Scott the executive director of ARC. It's nice to have someone who I call a personal friend running the commission. He gets the needs of North Carolina. He gets the needs of rural North Carolina. He understands what it's like to do economic development and community development in these communities. Scott is a Ready graduate, and he also was a Rural Center board member for a number of years. He's also served on the state's Economic Development Board, been on the State Economic Development Board Association, and he also was on the Workforce Commission board as well. Scott is a graduate of the University of Greensboro, and I'll tell you a little bit about what Scott's role is at ARC, and he'll talk a little bit more about this. ARC is a federal, state, and local government partnership, and the word partnership is extremely important. And everything that ARC does, we evaluate where are the partners in investments that we make. And Scott oversees that program for 13 states, and if you can imagine 13 states from northern Mississippi to southern New York, are we similar or are we different? And Scott has to navigate that, and quite frankly, we're very similar when it comes to the needs of Appalachia in those 13 states. And Scott is responsible for making sure the investments that Congress allows ARC to make are solid investments that help move the region forward, whether it's job creation, job retention, workforce development, healthcare, education, making sure communities have access to quality infrastructure, where that's water, sewer, roads, broadband. He also spends a lot of time, and he'll mention this, talking about how to help communities build their capacity, which is one reason I'm so proud to be an investment partner in the Homegrown Leaders. Community capacity is so critical in helping move our rural communities forward. And so Scott, I think, will spend some time talking about that. But I'm going to give you a little tidbit. Scott is most proud, not only to be a North Carolinian, but he has 2 grandsons, Waylon and Jackson, and those are the pride and joy. And so if you see Scott carrying around his cell phones and wonder who those smiling faces are on the back of his cell phone covers, he has these really cool cell phone covers that show off how proud he is of his 2 grandsons who live in Western North Carolina. And so with that, I would like to ask Scott and Farrell to come to the stage. Thank you.
It's a real pleasure to be here. Good to see all of you. Let me indulge a little bit of add-on to the biography. The Rural Center said that I didn't send them an adequate biography. So let me make amends. I've had a long relationship and friendship with the Rural Center, and so I'm really honored and proud to be here. You probably don't know, but I'll just tell you, I was the co-author of one of the long Rural Center reports. I don't think my name was on it. I think I was the secret writer. I was also on the steering committee of the Rural Prosperity Task Force that many of you remember that Erskine Bowles chaired almost 20 years ago now. And I won't pass up the opportunity to do a little promotion of Education NC, ednc.org. Write it down, put it on your iPhone right now, ednc.org. We have expanded into covering community colleges. The initial funding for ednc.org came from rural superintendents, and we've been especially diligent in covering the issues facing rural schools. And so thank you for letting me add on a little bit. Scott, it's a real pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you, sir. You too.
Regionalism has been a topic of policymaking and discussion for a long time. I'm old enough to remember the Nixon administration's efforts to build regional area task forces and planning agencies. The Appalachian Regional Commission started in the mid-1960s as part of the anti-poverty program after President Johnson took tours of Appalachia. So let's start, Scott, with thinking about where the ARC began and how it has changed over the years.
Great. Thank you. Well, good morning again, everybody. It is great to be here and to see so many friends that I have not seen in a number of years. It's just a great homecoming. So, Patrick, thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm very honored, and thank you very much. ARC has made great strides over the years. President Kennedy, while he was campaigning across Appalachia and Kentucky and West Virginia, promised if he was elected he would set up a commission to look at how to improve the economic conditions in Appalachia. And so when he was elected, he did. And they had a study commission, and the recommendations came back, and legislation was drafted, and President Johnson signed that legislation in 1965 that created the Appalachian Regional Commission. The study said that additional investment into the region over and above the federal investment that's already going into the region needed to be provided by the federal government. Of course, the states like that. They said, well, that's great, just send us the money. And the federal government said, well, no, let's look at this about a partnership, as Olivia mentioned in her introduction. And so they created the commission. The governors of the 13 states from New York to Mississippi are the commission members. They represent their states. As Olivia mentioned, they appoint an alternate to represent themselves when they can't be at the meetings, and Jim McCleskey is the Governor Cooper's representative. Olivia, as our state program officer here, and for ARC, oversees the program. And then the federal side is represented by a federal co-chair, and the federal co-chair is appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. Our new federal co-chair has been on board about 7 months, and he is Tim Thomas. I have said a number of times, Tim's been there 7 months, but it seems like he's been there about 3 years. He gets it. He understands it. He's moving forward very quickly. So it's been great to onboard Tim. And it takes the federal government vote. The federal co-chair has 1 vote on the commission, and the governors as a whole have 1 vote. So for us to move something forwards, at least 7 of the governors need to agree, and the federal co-chair need to agree to that. All the dollars that we invest have to be concurred or signed off on by the governor of the state and the federal co-chair. So it takes both, and nothing can move forward unless both have agreed for that to happen. So that's a bit of how we're made up. In 1960, the poverty rate in Appalachia was over 30%. Today, it's just over 16%. 1960, we had about 295 distressed counties. Today we have around 90 to 93 distressed counties. So a lot of progress has been made. On education, we used to look at education and look at where we were with the high school graduation rate. And in 1960, the Appalachian region was below the national average. Today, we're about at parity with the national average, but now we measure college and post-high school education, and we're behind on that. So the bars move every once in a while on us, but we keep focused and keep rolling.
Yeah, when I was the Washington correspondent for the News and Observer, former Governor Bob Scott was at the ARC. He was
Right.
the federal co-chair, and my friend Jesse White was at the ARC during the Clinton administration. My sense of the situation is, because with my own little bit of history with the ARC, is that the ARC focuses much tighter on economic development, road building, infrastructure than maybe it was at the beginning. I may be wrong about that, but I'd like you to talk about it.
Certainly. Every 5 years, we do a 5-year strategic plan, and we were just starting the process. And as I came on board, we looked at that now as an investment strategy as opposed to a strategic plan. So we have 5 investment areas, and critical infrastructure is one, but so is community capacity building, entrepreneurial and business development. So it is broad. We were really founded and established to look at basic infrastructure. And over the years, though, we have diversified that type of investment into the region to entrepreneurial development, leadership. There are a number of different things that we work with in workforce development as well.
Yeah, and you've been stimulating or leading the effort to create a highway system, right, through the mountain areas. Where does that stand?
Well, it's about 90-some% complete. It's called the Appalachian Development Highway System. We had funding up until about 2012, direct appropriation to us. 2012, when they changed the highway bill, that funding now goes straight to the Department of Transportation, but we still have oversight of the completion. We have, I think, about 6 to 8% left, but of course, it's the toughest 6 to 8% left across the region.
Any roads in North Carolina?
Yes, Quarter K in far west is a part of the Appalachian Development Highway System, and of course, there's been lots of discussion about the status and trying to get that to move forward.
Yeah. When he came into office in his first budget, President Trump proposed eliminating the Appalachian Regional Council along with other regional councils like the Delta Regional Council. You're here.
I am.
Apparently, it didn't get eliminated. But is the ARC endangered, or is it worried about its future?
Well, I will tell you that you're right. For the fiscal year that just closed out, when the president submitted his budget for that fiscal year, he had a line item of $2 million to have an orderly shutdown of Appalachian Regional Commission by this past September. Congress, on the other hand, appropriated about $52 to $155 million for us, and that's why we're still here. However, for the budget proposal for this current fiscal that we went into, President Trump had $152 million in his line item for the ARC to continue for us to move forward. And so his budget will be coming out again, and we anticipate to be back in that. We have...
It helps to have Mitch McConnell from Kentucky as the Senate leader, right?
Well, it does, but I will also say, and I mean this in all sincerity, is we cannot lobby for our funding. We cannot go down to Congress and say, don't do that. We're not allowed by statute. It was the grassroots folks that really, really across this region rose up, and we kept a 3-inch, 3-ring binder of all the editorials and letters that we were copied on from folks like y'all in the room all across our region that really let the appropriators, but also the president and the administration know the value of ARC, and they saw that in our funding. When I got to ARC in September of 2014, the appropriation was about $70 million. This year, our direct appropriation is $165 million. So,
well, I want to get to the vision for the future of the ARC, but let's talk about 3 or 4 of the specific issues that you are addressing or that are facing Appalachian communities. Let's start with opioids. It's been in the news a lot. The map, when you see the map of the most intense communities with opioid addiction rates, Appalachia just leaps out at you. What have you learned at the ARC, and can the ARC do anything about it, or is that somebody else's problem in Medicare and Medicaid and other law enforcement?
Well, the opioid addiction crisis really started in the ARC region, and our new federal co-chair, Tim Thomas, is making substance abuse disorder a primary factor in what we can do as a region and trying to figure out what that is. We're going to start doing some listening sessions across our region to find out what the role is for ARC. But for us, it's a workforce development issue. We're not a healthcare agency, but it is a workforce issue. And as the CEO of Advantage West, or the CEO of Henderson County Partnership for Economic Development years ago, healthcare was not, for me in recruitment, we had a hospital, we knew the number of beds, we knew the number of doctors. But healthcare was other issues. We didn't have them around our table. Many of you recall the Certified Industrial Site program that really set people forward that had a certified site. They were ahead of the game. I really think today that health of the workforce is as important as a certified industrial site. For those communities that are able to say, we have a healthy workforce, and they'll show up and show that the health care and the health providers are a part of the community. We always talk about the quality and the dedication of our workforce, but we also have to talk about a health of the workforce. And it's not just when they pass a drug test to get them to the job. We got to be sure that they're healthy enough to be able to come to work after that. And so we look at the substance abuse crisis as a workforce development issue. A job is what is going to help them in their recovery. And so we're looking at focusing on recovery to work and helping those folks that are in recovery find a job that is going to provide them the hope to move forward. Scary statistics are that the person in recovery is going to fail recovery 5 times. We've got to figure out a way to cut that down, but also help provide them the hope that they have to be able to move forward.
Well, what should the 26 counties in North Carolina do to work with the Appalachian Regional Commission on opioids, on what you're planning to do or getting ready to at least to listen about doing? What's your message for the policy leaders, the nonprofits in those counties that you're familiar with? What should they be gearing up for?
Well, we'll be doing a listening session in the region early 2019 to hear what people's thoughts are on that. But where we are again is what is the opportunity in recovery to work? It's a huge issue, and so I do think this is opportunity for regionalism to look at this as a region and how across all of North Carolina is this affected. And what do we do to move that forward? What are the components that you can work in and be successful, understanding that it's not just what you do is solving the issue, that you are a part of a strategy and you are working on a certain component of whatever that strategy is. It might be prevention, it might be education, it might be workforce and recovery to employment.
Yeah, how does the North Carolina ARC counties compare or contrast with the rest of the region in terms of the intensity of the opioid epidemic?
It is a challenge across our entire region. I think the hot spots of the issue, and no longer is it just opioid. Actually, some of the opioid is leveling off, or the steep climb is not as steep as it was, but the issue is it's other addictions that are coming on board now. But in North Carolina, it's a huge issue. I do think that it really started more in the central part, and eastern Kentucky, West Virginia, the Appalachian area of Ohio are probably the hardest hit of this issue. but it is a challenge, I will tell you, across all 420 of our counties.
I thought you made a really fascinating point, important point, at least to me. We'll see if they think it's important. That health of the workforce is as important as a certified site. I thought, talk a little bit more about what kind of training, education, health, what kind of workforce, what's the package of qualities needed in Appalachia to move the economy forward and to reduce the poverty rate?
Well, skills building. A lot of times we talk about, technology is changing and what do we have to educate for, and we don't know what's coming. And then it's not about knowing that we went from the bag phone in the 1990s to a cell phone that's a computer today. We weren't training for that, but what we were doing is we need to give the people the ability to be innovative and figure out that how you get from that bag phone to an iPhone. And we, like I said, don't know what that technology is going to be, but the skill sets of being entrepreneurial and being innovative have to get us there. But the workforce issue is you look across, so many of us are faced with some of the lowest unemployment rates that we've ever faced, but the workforce participation rate is some of the highest, or non-participation rate is some of the highest levels that we've also faced.
Meaning that a lot of people are just not looking for a job.
Or can't get a job because they may have issues from addiction, record, can't pass the drug test. So what do we do to loosen up that workforce participation rate for our employers to be able to find folks and our folks to be able to get a job? Many of you have heard me talk about a job equals hope, opportunity, and prosperity. And to me, some of that is the opportunity for us to move through this crisis as well, the health crisis.
What's the ARC doing in terms of innovation, stimulating entrepreneurship, creating new enterprises, developing new ideas that are applicable and can be executed in the smaller communities of Appalachia?
Well, we just released a study, and if you go to arc.gov and look under research and reports, there's information about an entrepreneurial study that we did about communities that are very successful in entrepreneurial development across the ARC region, from the southern tier of New York. Asheville's highlighted, Chattanooga's highlighted, but it's not big cities as well. It's small towns, as I say, in the southern tier of New York that talk about what are those opportunities and how were they successful. ARC invests in strategies. We don't like to invest in one-off projects. We want to invest into components of a strategy. And one of the examples that I talk about is, we like quality of place and quality of life in our communities, and that's what we're striving for, is to develop as community development and economic development leaders is how do we revitalize our downtowns? How do we get to a place of having that quality of life, that quality of place? And so it's looking at the strategy and providing an entrepreneurial ecosystem that is accepted to the folks. It's the access to capital, and it doesn't have to be large capital. I mean, a lot of times when we start thinking about access to capital, we think about venture firms, angel funds, which are all good, but sometimes they're small revolving loan funds. Sometimes it's a way a community is able to offset the cost of going into a storefront, and instead of charging rent, you charge a percentage of sales for a period of time that gets that business and entrepreneur up and going until they're able to hit a set rent amount. But we invest into the strategies of developing those ecosystems across a regional.
Well, not all communities are of equal capacity or have the powerful set of geographic assets, natural resources. And so you've got $152 million, which is, in the big scheme of things, not that much money. What's been your experience? How do we break down the barriers and the mindset between and among communities that they think of themselves as rivals for economic development. How do we get communities, based on your own experience in Advantage West, and now looking down is not quite, looking south from Washington.
Maybe looking back with experience.
Yeah, that's better.
I think regionalism is critical. I think that we know, and I will say what we all know is the workforce doesn't look at a boundary, employers don't look at boundaries, our issues are not centered around county municipal lines, they're regional issues. And how do we work in that manner, and having a structure that can pull across all those boundaries and bring those folks together to talk about the opportunity to move forward. How do we bring different people to the table? There needs to be across all the states in our region, the 13 states, regional organizations that can pull those folks together, that are able to kind of be that neutral convener and that has broader boundaries. We work very closely with local development districts, and they do a good job in their work, and some are able to expand out, but they've got roles of where their boundaries are, and so it's tough to expand that out. And they do great work, and how else can we utilize that infrastructure to broaden across broader boundaries? There's good work with that, and I congratulate them. I mean, the North Carolina folks do great with it. Sarah has a grant that she's working with that is based not even in her region, and so I think those are examples that you can use to bring leadership together for regionalism. I will say a way to do that is our POWER initiative, which was the Partnership for Opportunities, Workforce, and Economic Revitalization. Folks love the acronyms. When we receive funding for that, it's to help provide assistance by communities that have been impacted in the downturn in the coal economy. One of the things that we developed as we were looking at the program in partnership with our states is that to be successful, you really needed to bring new people to the table to help you invest into your project, to do your project. If you were bringing an application to us that had the same players that you typically work with, it didn't score as well as looking at you brought new folks to the table. So I think there's a great role for funders to ask regions to say, who else are you working with? Who do you need to bring to the table that you haven't brought to the table? But having a regional perspective and having an organization that is able to convene across boundaries is significant. And sometimes it's not just county and municipal lines, sometimes it's even state lines, because those issues flow across those state lines as well.
I'm reminded back when the university, Chapel Hill, pardon me, we were taking faculty around the state on a tour. That project went away during the recession. But anyway, we took new faculty members up to the top of the Bank of America Tower in Charlotte, and Hugh McCall was supposed to give the talk, but he got called away for something. So the substitute, and I don't remember the name, was rattling on, and at one point he leaned over to his assistant at the table and he said, "Is Union County in North Carolina and South Carolina?" And most of the new faculty didn't laugh at all because they didn't know the difference, but the group of us in the back who had been around a while had started chuckling. And then when we got on the bus, we started thinking about it. From the top of the tower, you don't see political boundaries.
Right.
And it all looks, from the investment banker's standpoint, a region.
Right.
There is, of course, a Union County, North Carolina, and a Union County, South Carolina, but he was talking about North Carolina. But we need to think about that these boundaries, while important politically and culturally, are in terms of the way the economy works. not always the defining features of the dynamics.
Yeah. Finding those opportunities to expand regionalism, I think, is critical. I mentioned the local development districts and their work. But, sometimes when, you get your funding from those municipalities, those counties, the work needs to, it's expected to be there. But there is a great opportunity and great innovation going on that we see even in North Carolina of trying to get across those boundaries, and that the local development districts are working together for the region outside of not their region, but a greater region as well. The partnerships, I think John Chafee's on the next panel with you. I think regionalism, however it looks, it's critical to have that convener that is able to pull folks together and look at what is the need of the region and how do we solve it without looking at that boundary of the county or the municipality or even the state line. Because we're going to have to pull those folks together, and I think there's great roles for regionalism to move rural North Carolina further.
While I'm thinking about it, it's not on my notes, but something you said triggered it. What's the role of, and what should people out here expect from the universities in the Appalachian region? What should they expect from the community colleges?
Great, they're all great partners. And I think I've seen, especially across our region, a number of the universities are getting engaged in entrepreneurial development. They're looking at what are moving programs forward. The community colleges are great opportunities for convening communities and, excuse me, pulling the folks together and really being the catalyst in their area to move specific programs forward. I will talk about kind of the craft beverage industry. We've looked at universities that have come up with programs on the biology side of that and fermentation sciences, because you're seeing communities being able to really grow and develop jobs in their economies off of an industry that's very specific. And the community colleges and the universities have looked at how do they help the communities do that. And it's not just for the community that they serve, but they're regional. They're not just for their service area. They know that they're going to be working towards something that is going to be of great benefit across counties and grow a region. It's just one component of a role that the universities and the community college do get involved into the local development of the communities. I see it across our region where community colleges are the leaders. Universities get real involved in our leadership in moving communities and regions forward.
Yeah. One of the features, broadly speaking, of rural communities is that the population, as in aggregate, is getting older. Younger people are leaving, moving to the cities, going to community colleges, university, moving to where the more robust job growth is. What can we do, from your experience, both in North Carolina and now in Washington, to raise up a new generation of rural leaders? And how do we, as a state and a society, help replenish the leadership structure of rural communities?
One of the things that we heard across the region when we were developing our most recent strategic investment strategy was leadership. And when we were in Alabama doing a listening session, folks were talking about the need for leadership and the next wave of leaders coming in. When we were in West Virginia at a listening session, it was like the same person was following us around because we were hearing the same thing, although it was different people, the need for leadership. And so we've looked at that. And this May, we will be announcing and opening up applications for a new leadership class or an institute called the Appalachian Leadership Institute that ARC will be doing a region-wide leadership program that will supplement, support, and leverage local and state leadership programs to grow leaders. So keep an eye out. If you don't get our newsletter, arc.gov. There's a pop-up window when you go to our website. You can sign up and keep up to date on when that's coming.
So what should they start thinking about in terms of how to connect to this?
And what does leadership mean? When we talk about we need new leaders, sometimes leadership is in a specific sector of where we're needing to move forward. For some communities, it might be looking at how do we grow capital in our community for our entrepreneurs. So we need to develop the leadership there, the skills of who can do that. Angel investing. How do you get involved in angel investing? That is growing leaders. Looking at the growing of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, it's not just the elected officials that are then the leaders. When at Advantage West, we had the Certified Entrepreneurial Community Program. In one of our communities, it was the librarian was taking the lead on developing the ecosystem of entrepreneurship. So what we'll be looking at a cross-border area of a leadership development program that is not developed yet. And so thoughts are great. We've been actually, I brought on a lady named Jessica Mosley to head up this development, and she's talked with Patrick and the folks at the Rural Center here about their leadership program. We've talked to the folks at Leadership North Carolina. Everybody's been so supportive of this because they see it not as competition, but as a way to leverage their leadership classes to advance the next generation of leaders, no matter their age, and no matter what we define then as the need for that leadership.
Well, one of the leadership struggles in rural America, rural North Carolina, is attracting strong school leadership principals. ARC is not an education agency, but I was wondering if there's a school component to this leadership initiative.
Right now, this is what we have for our leadership program.
Yeah.
It's a blank page. We're working on the development of it. So all ideas are great. We don't know yet. We have an RFP out. We have proposals being presented to us in early December for us to work with an entity to develop the curriculum, to develop the programs. They will be based off of our 5 strategic investment strategies that are in our strategic investment plan. And workforce development in education is a component of that.
Right. Thinking of workforce development, a key component is community colleges. Appalachia does have a fairly broad network of community colleges, junior colleges, small private institutions. Strong. Tell us a little bit about how that sector of education connects with what the ARC is looking for.
Well, it's a critical component, and in fact, we support an organization called the Community Colleges of Appalachia, which are all the community colleges from New York to Mississippi in our region that get together. It's the presidents of those community colleges that come together twice a year to look at opportunities and really do some R&D from each of their other campuses or their colleagues. And when I talk about R&D, I like to define it the way Becky Anderson defines it, and that's research and duplicate, is finding those best practices of what are other community colleges doing and how can they bring that back to their area. And that's a great example as well of regionalism in the community colleges, looking about how can a New York a university community college in upstate New York benefit a community college in Mississippi. A lot of times they are focusing on the same issues, but when you pull the folks together and you're talking about it, it provides that opportunity to see that you're not alone. Others have faced it or are facing it, and you can work together in addressing those issues to move your community, your region forward.
Should a community have a bright idea, something, an initiative that springs up from community conversation that may not fit in the classic definitions, and what could that community do to come to ARC and get some assistance?
We have a couple of programs, and the dollars that we are appropriated by our funders, Congress, they're directed, and $73 million of our appropriation goes to what we call our area development programs across the state. And that those dollars are appropriated by a formula to each of the states, and that's what Olivia heads up here in North Carolina, is the ARC Area Development Program. And so those applications are generated grassroots. They come up from local. She works with them. There's an open competition that folks can submit their ideas to.
So she's real important. You got to get to know her.
I'm telling you,
right?
if you haven't talked or met Olivia, she's going to kill me. But right, you saw her. You need to come talk to her about your program. She is your first point of contact. I'll also say, when folks call our team in D.C. about a thought or an idea, well, first thing we ask is, have you talked to your state ARC program manager yet? Because they've got to be involved in it. They're the face of ARC for us in the state, and they are able to be on the ground and look at it and evaluate it. Those dollars come through the state and get recommended to us from the governor. So the communication line with your state ARC program and us is very important. As I said earlier, even through a couple of our competitive grant programs that don't flow directly through the state still has to concur with the investment of those dollars into the communities. So they have to be aware and understand what those projects are and be supportive of those projects.
So who in state government is the point of contact?
So for state government, for the first point of contact, Olivia is our ARC program manager. She talked about Jim McCleskey being our state alternate. And then Governor Cooper also has a say in which one, absolutely, is our as a member of the commission, absolutely.
What's now that you've been there a while, and I'd like for you to reflect on a couple of questions looking forward. What do you see as opportunities in Western North Carolina for economic and community advancement? We've been. Let me preface it by saying, that our rural communities were hit really hard by the recession of 10 years ago, and it's been a long, slow recovery for a lot of communities, and some communities really haven't recovered very, very well. What do you see as the future for the communities you used to coordinate in Advantage West? What's your assessment of where we're headed?
Well, I'll even speak for rural North Carolina and just not the ARC region. Our federal co-chair talks a lot about that there is no reason that the next great entrepreneur cannot come from rural North Carolina. There's no reason that they can't come from anywhere across our region in any rural community. And I think the opportunity is don't be afraid about those innovative ideas. A little bit of conversation dinner last night about failing fast. They had the panelists last night talked about entrepreneurs failing fast, but it's really, don't be afraid. Let's look at what are those opportunities. Have the infrastructure in the communities to be able to help your entrepreneurs be successful. Think about hope. What is it? It's communities. It's very interesting. I will look at communities across our region that are of similar size. And some communities are sitting back saying, who is going to come here and help us? We're small, we don't have money, who's going to come in and help us? While other communities that have the same exact circumstances, they're smaller, they don't have the dollars, are out there moving forward, thinking about what are those innovative opportunities that's going to help us move forward. And that is rural North Carolina, whether it's the Advantage West region or Eastern region or the Southeast region of North Carolina. It is the opportunity to look forward and be innovative and move the community forward. So it's about how do we generate the hope that we are able to do this, we can do this. And when you look at some of the great entrepreneurial companies that started in North Carolina and rural North Carolina, we can do it. So we know the next great entrepreneur, whether it turns into being a large business like Lowe's Hardware that started in Wilkes County, North Carolina, or is it a smaller entrepreneur that their focus is the 2 to 3 or 4 jobs that they've created that is making a difference in their community? But it is having the determination to say, how do we do this, and the energy to move it forward.
Governor William Winter in Mississippi once told me that he could drive into a town in Mississippi and tell whether the banker was progressive or not. You know, that there was, that those communities that were doing better, there were people there investing, putting up capital, lending to businesses. What's the role of the, I was getting ready to say, what's the role of the private sector? But of course, that takes in everything except the public sector. But what sort of private sector leadership do we need, and what are the key components that local entities like banks and insurance companies and storekeepers and others can play in?
Sure. When we look at moving a region forward, moving a community forward, it is the power of the convening. Who are the folks that convene and bring the people together to talk about the ideas, the opportunities to think about what is the strategy. And it is not about we need X. Talk a little bit about in Ohio, there's a small town, Somerset, Ohio. We funded a project to redo their sidewalks in their downtown. Well, it wasn't that it was a sidewalk initiative that we funded. It was a downtown redevelopment strategy that they were working to enhance the appearance and the quality of their downtown, and the sidewalks was only a component of that. It wasn't, we have crumbling sidewalks. It was, we have a strategy to redevelop our downtown, and part of that strategy is pedestrian-friendly sidewalks. And so it was business communities that come together to look at developing that strategy, and ARC is able to fund and looks to prioritize our investments into a strategy, a long-term strategy of moving a community forward. Private sector, the public sector coming together to talk about in the development of what is that strategy and how does our community look and where do we want to go and how do we get there. A lot of times we hear communities, well, we might have a building and we want to get a grant to do something with our building, and our question always is then, well, what is the strategy? What is behind that you know that's going to be successful? What's the business plan? And that's where I think private sector can come in and help with developing those strategies, looking at the outcomes, and where is the return on that investment from the public sector side.
I wasn't here last evening for the discussion with the Fallows, but I have read their book. In fact, I assigned the book to my students this semester. What struck me about the profiles of the communities was how similar a lot of their strategies were that developed. Does ARC have a set of criteria, a kind of a template that you're looking for from a community?
No, we don't, because every community is going to be different, and their movement forward is going to be different. And the components that we look at, and that's applicable across rural North Carolina or rural communities, is what are you trying to achieve? And then what is the strategy for that? And the leader of those strategies, as I said, could be, it's not necessarily folks who you might think it would be. Earlier I talked about a librarian taking on an entrepreneurship strategy. That's kind of, that's not the first person you think you would turn to move forward in entrepreneurial eco-development system strategy.
That's no insult to librarians.
It's not at all, because they're very critical in moving forward, but it's so, the example is, you don't know where your leader's going to be, and you need to turn to them, and as you bring that together and you look at what those strategies are. So it's not that we have a template of a strategy, because one size doesn't fit all in that. They are all different. But the important thing is what is that strategy? In Pennsylvania, in northwest Pennsylvania, they have what's called the PA Wilds. It started out as a wild elk viewing project, and they wanted a visitor center, and you could go and you could watch the elk, kind of like Cataloochee in western North Carolina. And now all of a sudden that was successful, but then they took that PA Wilds idea, and that's now the brand for the region. So their entrepreneurial program is now the PA Wilds. Their local food system is now called the PA Wilds. So they've branded their region off of what initially started out as a cultural tourism opportunity, and they've turned it into a regional multi-county brand that they move their different initiatives forward under a banner called PA Wilds.
Our friendly timekeeper down there says I have time for about one more question.
All right.
So,
and a short answer?
Well, you can, it's up to you now. No, my last question is, as I signaled earlier, a rather broad question. What's you personally or ARC's vision of the future? Where are we headed? What are the next steps?
We all know there are a lot of challenges before us, but there's great hope and opportunity before us as well. Looking at all of the innovative things that are going on across our region, from, as I've talked about, the 420 counties, it gives a lot of hope. There's a lot of struggle. I've talked about some successes that we've made in advancing the region, but we've also talked about some of the challenges that the opioid crisis is presenting before us, and how do we move forward with that. But I think a critical component of what gives me the hope as I go across this region is the opportunity of folks that come together, that sit down and are interested in figuring out how do we move forward. We've talked about regionalism. You were talking about it here in a little bit. I think there's a strong need for regionalism in regions to be able to pull those folks and be conveners, to pull those ideas together and help develop that strategy to move forward. The hope for me is that we are doing that. We're seeing it. We're facing our challenges. We need to look at what are those innovative ways to move them forward and not be afraid to look at things differently and not be afraid to bring new people to the table that we typically don't bring to the table to help move that forward.
Well, listen, thank you for being here. I hope it was helpful to the folks out there. Now they know some faces and places they can go for funding and for ideas, and I suspect you'll get a lively and robust response to your leadership initiative. I hope so.
Well, I hope so. And I would say for the folks that are not in the ARC region and the counties, when we talk about applications and going for funding, I think that strategy is critical no matter if you're in the ARC region or not. Funders want to know what is the strategy, how are you moving it forward, and what is the return, and what's the support for that idea. And developing a strong application based off of an overall strategic plan or an overall strategy to move your community forward, I think is going to put you in a very strong position to have a quality project funded.
Let's thank Scott for being here. I hope that was okay. You think so? Yeah.